imagine sitting in a stark coal hospital room.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're looking at a loved one on life support.
Oh, man.
And you're just listening to that rhythmic hiss of the ventilator.
Mm-hmm.
And someone pulls you aside and they ask you to calculate this person's functional utility to decide if they should keep living.
Wow.
It sounds completely dystopian, right?
Right.
Like something out of a bleak sci-fi novel.
Yeah.
But according to modern secular bioethics, we subconsciously perform this kind of calculation all the time.
All the time.
We are constantly defining human worth in the modern world by what someone can do rather than what they fundamentally are.
It is arguably the most defining philosophical tension of our era. Because the moment you tie human value to utility, to what someone can produce or remember or contribute to the economy, you instantly create a sliding scale of worth.
Sliding scale, yeah.
Exactly. And someone is inevitably going to end up at the very bottom of that scale. And, history shows us that the results of that are usually just catastrophic.
Which brings us directly to the mission of our deep dive today.
Yeah.
We are exploring some incredibly fascinating research by Marc Bates. And he weaves together theology, history, and modern bioethics to figure out what actually makes human life sacred. He's leaning heavily on thinkers like ethicists David P. Gushee and Glenn H. Stassen and theologian Walter C. Kaiser Jr. to build this massive overarching framework.
It is a phenomenal synthesis. Bates traces this single unified theory of human sacredness, and he starts from the ancient Near East, and he walks it all the way into those very hospital rooms you just mentioned.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because, but actually, before we jump into the deep end, I need to put a pin in something really important.
Sure.
The source material we're exploring today, it touches on some highly charged, deeply sensitive, and honestly, often painful topics.
Very much so.
We're going to be talking about euthanasia, end-of-life care, and deeply held theological beliefs. I want to make it absolutely clear right up front that we are not taking political or ideological sides here.
Right.
We aren't endorsing these viewpoints. We're not telling you how to vote or what to believe. Our goal is strictly to map out the architecture of the argument presented in the specific text.
Yeah.
We just want to understand the logic of how this framework operates.
Right. We are looking at the internal mechanics of a very specific worldview. So to understand how this framework defines human life, we kind of have to start with the core conflict that Bates sets up.
Okay.
He contrasts two opposing definitions of human worth. You have the secular view of functional utility on one side and the theological view of ascribed sacredness on the other.
Let's start with the secular view, because I feel like that is the water we are all currently swimming in,
Oh, absolutely.
The text points to modern bioethical heavyweights, thinkers like Peter Singer and Joseph Fletcher.
Yeah.
And they have a very specific baseline argument for who counts as a person.
Right. In that utilitarian framework, moral status is tied directly to what they call exercisable capacities.
Exercisable capacities.
Exactly. Meaning your moral worth is tethered to your cognitive and physical faculties. Like, are you self-conscious?
Right.
Do you have rational thought? Can you form memories? Can you contribute economically or socially?
Yeah.
Singer and Fletcher essentially argue that just being a member of the biological human species, that doesn't automatically grant you infinite moral value.
Wow.
If you lack those higher level capacities, your moral status diminishes.
It's like treating human life as a smartphone.
A smartphone, yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
Right. In the secular view, you are valued for what you can execute.
Mm-hmm.
So if the processor slows down because of age, or the screen cracks because of an accident, if the phone loses its functions, it just loses its value. It becomes disposable hardware.
Disposable hardware, yeah.
And if you apply that logic to human beings, say someone with advanced dementia or a severe intellectual disability or even a newborn infant, that capacity-based system suddenly becomes terrifyingly exclusionary.
It really does. It reduces the physical human body to just a biological commodity. You are only worth the sum of your outputs.
Right.
And the source text pushes back violently against this.
Yeah.
Bates counters with the biblical view, which argues that human worth is an ascribed status. It's objective. It's permanent.
Okay.
It is stamped on humanity by the Creator completely, regardless of our functional utility.
Ascribed. Meaning it's a decree.
Exactly.
Like you don't earn it and you can't lose it by, forgetting how to do math.
You cannot lose it. And to really grasp the weight of this ascribed status, we have to travel back to the ancient Near Eastern context of the book of Genesis.
Oh, I love this part.
It's so fascinating. If we look at the Hebrew word used for image in the phrase, image of God, the word is Tselem.
Tselem.
Right. Now, in the ancient Near East, Tselem was not some abstract, wispy, philosophical concept about having a soul or a conscience.
Which is how we usually think of it.
Right, exactly. But back then, it meant a literal physical statue.
So we've been reading Genesis backward this whole time.
Pretty much.
We treat being made in the image of God as a metaphor, but to an ancient person, it meant something incredibly tangible.
Oh, incredibly tangible. An ancient king or deity would place their Tselem, their physical statue, in a temple or at the borders of a newly conquered territory.
Oh, I see.
And that statue represented the localized presence, authority, and rule of that god or king.
Wow.
It was a physical marker planted in the dirt saying, this domain belongs to me and my authority is represented right here.
That is wild. It completely flips the script.
It does.
Genesis is essentially subverting the entire cultural norm of the ancient world. Like God is saying, I don't want carved stone idols placed in temples because I have already installed living, breathing, physical human beings,
yes,
male and female, as my authorized representative.
Exactly. The whole earth is the cosmic temple and humans are the statues inside it. So your identity is ontological. It is about what you are by virtue of creation, not what you can do. You are sacred simply because you are the physical marker of the Creator placed in the world.
But Bates points out that this ascribed worth isn't just a one-off poetry lesson from the first chapter of the Bible.
No, not at all.
It is the engine driving the entire narrative. And I think this is where we run into Walter C. Kaiser Jr.'s concept of the promise plan.
Yeah.
Now, the text uses that phrase a lot. What is the actual mechanism of a promise plan?
Okay, so it's called a promise plan because it functions sort of like a divine contract that builds over time. Kaiser argues the Bible isn't just a disjointed collection of moral fables.
Right.
It is a single, unified divine strategy. God makes a promise to preserve and redeem humanity and then executes a specific historical plan to back it up.
So it's progressively unfolding from Genesis to Revelation.
Exactly. And the absolute anchor of this contract is the protection of this ascribed human sacredness.
Okay, let's walk through that contract then, because the source tracks a few specific moments where the plan really escalates. It starts right after the flood with the Noahic covenant. That famous passage in Genesis 9 about the blood reckoning.
Right.
Where it says, whoever sheds human blood, by humans shall their blood be shed.
It sounds really harsh to modern ears.
Very harsh, yeah.
But the reason for the severity is what matters here. It isn't just a pragmatic societal rule to keep the peace. The text explicitly says murder is punished so severely because God made humanity in his own image.
Because it's an assault on the Tselem.
Exactly.
If you murder a person, you aren't just ending a biological life. You're essentially vandalizing the localized statue of the king. You're desecrating the temple.
That's a great way to phrase it. And as the promise plan moves forward to Mount Sinai and the prophets, we see this concept expand even more.
Okay.
It goes from just prohibiting murder to demanding active societal protection. The text references the concept of holiness or Kodesh.
Kodesh.
Yeah. Often we stereotype holiness as mystical withdrawal,
Right, like going to live in a cave, chanting, isolating yourself from the dirty world to remain pure.
Exactly. But the holiness code in Leviticus 19 defines holiness as horizontal righteousness.
Horizontal meaning person to person.
Yeah.
Like dirt under the fingernails, social interaction.
Yes, exactly. Leviticus commands the Israelites to be holy, and then it immediately follows that up with economic and social mandates.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah. It tells farmers to leave the edges of their fields unharvested so the poor can glean food.
Right.
It demands honest weights and scales in the marketplace. It specifically commands protection for the deaf and the blind.
So protecting the vulnerable isn't just a nice charitable add-on for when you have extra time.
No.
It is the very definition of covenant loyalty in this framework.
Yes.
And the source makes a very specific point here about how this plan carries forward into the New Testament. It uses the term non-supersessionist.
Right. So drawing on the Apostle Paul in Romans 11, non-supersessionism means that the New Testament doesn't just hit delete on the Old Testament promises made to ethnic Israel. Those original promises, that original social ethic, they remain irrevocable. Instead, the nations, the Gentiles, are grafted into this single ongoing ethical standard.
Like a wild branch being grafted into an ancient, deeply rooted olive tree.
That's the exact metaphor Paul uses. The mandate to protect human sacredness wasn't an obsolete rule swapped out for a purely spiritual religion. It is the enduring standard for everyone grafted into the community.
Okay, I get the Old Testament rule book. Protect the poor, don't cheat people, leave grain in the fields. But Christianity is often stereotyped as just worrying about the afterlife.
Sure.
Let's just save souls and get out of this physical world.
Right.
Does the New Testament actually maintain this physical social ethic?
Gushee and Stassen argue the exact opposite of that stereotype. They outline 5 specific Christological pillars to show that Jesus doesn't replace the promised plan.
Okay.
He is its historical and incarnational climax. He actually proves the sacredness of the physical body empirically.
Okay, let's get into these 5 pillars then. The first one is Jesus's inclusive ministry. He is constantly touching lepers, defending exploited widows, eating with social outcasts. He is actively dismantling the social hierarchies of his day that assign different levels of worth to different people.
Right. And pillar 2 is the incarnation itself. The very confession that the Word became flesh permanently hallows physical, biological, human existence.
Wow.
The text notes this is a direct strike against Gnostic dualism.
Oh, Gnosticism.
Yeah, Gnosticism was an ancient heresy, which honestly still thrives today in various forms.
Oh, absolutely.
And it believed the physical body was a dirty, temporary prison, and only the spirit was good.
You see that everywhere today. I mean, diet culture, extreme body hacking, the idea that we can just upload our consciousness to the cloud and escape our meat suits.
Meat suits, yeah. But the incarnation violently opposes that. If God takes on a physical digestive system, a nervous system, skin and bones, then matter actually matters.
Yeah.
The Apostle Paul echoes this when he says the body is a temple.
What's fascinating here is how the 3rd and 5th pillars take this elevation of the physical body and apply it universally. Pillar 3 is the cross. The crucifixion functions as the ultimate equalizing force for humanity in 2 specific ways.
Okay.
First, universal need. The idea that everyone has sinned levels all social, economic, and intellectual hierarchies. Nobody gets to claim they're intrinsically better than anyone else.
Right, right.
And second, universal redemptive price.
If the price paid on the cross was infinite for every single person, then no human being can ever be viewed as disposable garbage.
Exactly.
Or acceptable collateral damage. And this ties perfectly into Pillar 5, which brings in Dietrich Bonhoeffer's theology.
Oh, I love Bonhoeffer.
Yeah. Bonhoeffer argued that through the incarnation and the cross, Christ universally restores the distorted image of God to humanity. Jesus acts as the true, uncorrupted image, and he shares that dignity back with the entire human race.
But all of this, the incarnation, the cross, the teachings, none of it truly cements the sacredness of biological life without the ultimate proof.
Right, right.
Which brings us to Pillar 4, the resurrection.
Yes. By resurrecting in a physical body, one that could eat fish and still bore the scars of crucifixion, it proves that God is fundamentally for life.
For life, yeah.
He doesn't just abandon the biological project. He defeats physical death itself. It completely dismantles the terror of dying. The resurrection proves that biological death is a defeated enemy, not the final, terrifying word on human existence.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though.
Okay.
We are talking about humanity being universally hallowed, having this indestructible ontological status as the living statues of God.
Yes.
But let's be real. Humans still do horrific things.
Oh, absolutely.
Look at history. Look at the news today.
Yeah.
How does this framework deal with the absolute worst of humanity?
Yeah.
Like, does a genocidal tyrant still have this sacred worth?
That is the ultimate stress test for this entire ethical norm. The source brings in theologian Karl Barth to address this paradox. Barth argued that human sin actually highlights the depth of divine love. The fact that God values humanity despite its profound, sometimes monstrous depravity shows just how absolute that ascribed worth really is.
But practically, how do you hold both of those things in your head at the same time? Like, how do you say a monster is sacred?
Bates resolves this by differentiating between 2 Hebrew concepts. So we've talked about Tselem, right?
Right, the ontological status.
Exactly, which is permanent. But there is also kavod, which translates to functional glory or moral alignment.
Okay, so Tselem is what you are, kavod is how you act.
Yes, think of it like a counterfeit bill. A perpetrator of horrific systemic violence is morally bankrupt. They have completely lost their kavod. Their actions are a monstrous desecration of life, and they hold no functional value in how they act. But the paper they are printed on, their Tselem, is still treasury issued. They retain their indestructible status as an image bearer.
So what does that mean for justice? We can't just let them go because they have treasury-issued paper.
No. The framework insists that retributive justice absolutely demands they be stopped, restrained, and punished to protect victims.
Okay.
Vandalizing the statue requires severe consequences. But because they retain their Tselem, they cannot be dehumanized in the process of that punishment.
Right.
You cannot reduce them to vermin, and you cannot subject them to sadistic torture. Even behind bars, their underlying ontological status as a human being must be recognized.
Wow.
It is the only thing that prevents justice from devolving into mere vengeance.
It is a phenomenally difficult line to walk.
It really is.
You punish the crime with absolute severity to protect life, but you refuse to strip the criminal of their basic humanity.
Exactly.
So we've looked at how this applies to the morally corrupt. Let's pivot to the other extreme. How does this text apply this permanent, ascribed sacredness to the physically decaying? The source takes this framework straight back into that modern hospital room we talked about at the very beginning.
It does. It steps right into the contemporary bioethical debates, specifically regarding euthanasia and physician-assisted suicide.
And again, keeping our impartiality disclaimer in mind, we are just mapping out the author's logic here.
Right.
The text argues that physician-assisted suicide violates this sacredness because it assumes absolute individual autonomy.
Yes. The secular argument for euthanasia often rests entirely on autonomy. It is my life. I can end it if I choose, especially to avoid suffering.
Right.
But this biblical framework argues that we are not our own. We are created by God and, as the New Testament says, bought with a price.
Bought with a price.
We are stewards of our lives, not the ultimate owners. Therefore, self-elimination usurps God's prerogative.
The source brings in ethicist Stanley Hauerwas here. And his argument about compassion really stopped me in my tracks.
Oh, it's powerful.
He argues that in our modern society, compassion often devolves into eliminating the sufferer as a way to prevent the suffering.
It is a profound critique of modern medicine. Hauerwas is pointing out a fundamental breakdown in community.
Yeah.
When a society is faced with astronomical healthcare costs, or when elderly people are made to feel they are a financial or emotional burden on their families,
Which happens so often.
all the time, offering death as a quote-unquote compassionate solution is actually a form of societal abandonment.
Wow.
The sacredness framework demands that instead of lethal prescriptions, society must provide radical, cost-bearing hospice presence.
Radical presence.
Yes, it demands pain management, deep love, and unbroken human solidarity, even when it is wildly inconvenient.
But wait, I'm hung up on a logical trap here.
Okay, but that.
If life is unconditionally sacred and we absolutely cannot end it, shouldn't we use every single machine, every ventilator, every heroic medical intervention possible to keep a physical body alive forever?
Oh, this raises an important question, and it is a trap that the source explicitly warns against. It calls this trap vitalism.
Vitalism. Okay, unpack the mechanics of that.
So vitalism is the attempt to artificially preserve biological life indefinitely at absolutely any cost, refusing to accept the inevitability of human mortality. The text argues that vitalism is actually a form of idolatry.
Idolatry.
Yeah, it is driven by a post-Christian terror of death.
Because if you truly believe in Pillar 4, the resurrection, you shouldn't be terrified of the physical end.
Exactly. Christians shouldn't fear mortality to the point of turning biological survival into an absolute idol.
Right.
When a terminal illness takes its natural, irreversible course, the framework says that withdrawing invasive, futile medical machinery is not killing.
It's surrendering.
It is a peaceful surrender. It allows the active dying process to run its natural course.
Wow.
Aided by palliative care, the text describes this as a good death. It is resting in the hands of the Redeemer rather than subjecting a sacred body to technological torture just to delay the inevitable by a few precarious days.
It is a fascinating middle ground. It rejects the utilitarian shortcut of euthanasia on one side, but it completely dismantles the fear-driven idolatry of vitalism on the other.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean?
Yeah.
If you are listening to this right now, whether you are debating moral philosophy in a college classroom, or voting on public healthcare policy, or maybe most profoundly, just sitting at the hospital bedside of an aging grandparent.
Yeah.
This framework offers a radically different lens.
It really does.
It asks you to view human worth not as a fragile capacity that fades when memory slips or the body breaks down.
Right.
Instead, it asks you to view it as an indestructible status bestowed by the Creator.
Yes.
It's a status that demands our protection, our justice, and our unbroken cost-bearing presence.
And if I can leave our listeners with one final thought to mull over.
Please do.
I want to circle all the way back to that ancient Near Eastern context we discussed at the very beginning. The concept of the Tselem.
The living statues.
Right. In the ancient world, it was universally believed that a temple was completely invalid. It was just a dead, empty building if it did not have the physical image of the deity placed inside it.
Right.
The statue was the proof of the god's presence. So if we take this biblical promise plan seriously, what does it mean for the physical world today when we ignore, isolate, or institutionalize the very vulnerable people who, according to this text, are the living statues of the Creator?
Yeah.
What kind of temple are we building if we discard the images placed within it?